I think that was one of those songs that we were either going to get right or it was going to be the end of the choir. I can't say enough about the leadership of Joseph, and then having someone like John who can come along and direct, but to take a song that's so far out of our genre as a choir and to squeeze us into that and just make it come together. And of course, as a choir, we give all thanks to Jesus. That's why we all sing, and that's why we put in the time week after week to lift that offering up to the Lord. So I pray that you were blessed in listening to that. And there's a great message in that as well. And thank you, Gary. So recently I joined a Facebook group here in the area called Bastrop Buy, Sell, or Trade, and the Hegdals are moving, so I know Jennifer's been posting some things on there, and those are some nice things. So if you still have furniture, I was going to say, if anyone wants a table, come talk to Jennifer after service, and I'm sure you guys can come and haul it away and give them some money for it. But for the most part, you don't see a lot of actually nice things on there that Jennifer's selling. You see furniture and electronics and home furnishings and cars and toys and anything and everything that people want to sell, they put on this Bastrop Buy, Sell, or Trade. And a lot of the things that people are selling, in some way, they have lost a sense of value to them. Not all the time. I'm sure some of the things that you're selling now, you want to hold on to, but just for the purpose of moving, sometimes you have to. But there are some times when you look at something and you realize that a person is trying to get just enough money out of this because whatever it is that they're selling has lost some value to them. And it would be better just to make a couple of bucks and get it out of the house. Recently, we just purchased some new furniture for our living room, and I brought our love seat and a recliner to my office to still be used, but our couch had enough wear and tear on it that I didn't want to take to the office, and I didn't want to put it online for someone to buy it. And so I went on to Bastrop Buy, Sell, and Trade, and I took a picture of the couch, and I just put free. Just come and pick it up. We put it on, it was on the front lawn, so people just had to come by, swing by, and I told Becca, I said, I'll bet you within 20 minutes that couch is going to be gone. I don't know where y'all live, but at least in our neighborhood in Riverside Grove, if you put some furniture on the side of the road, there's a furniture ferry that comes by, and it just goes. And so I had faith, and I said, I'm going to put this couch out there. And within 20 minutes, a truck pulls up, and the guy knocks on our door, and he says, "Hey, I'd like the couch. Can you help me load it up?" Gladly. Okay, so we loaded it up. From my perspective, we're going from old and worn to new and exciting. And from his perspective, he needed a couch for his man cave in his garage. Perfect. So it's yours now. Now let's say I see this couch later on down the road for sale or even for free. What are the chances that I'm going to want that couch back? For me, absolutely zero chance that I'm going to want that back. By that time, the couch will have even more wear and tear on it than what we had when we gave it away. And besides that, we've replaced the couch. We don't need another couch. So that couch has absolutely no value to me. Now, I think we all experience this with many other things in our life. Our culture has exasperated this idea of going from old to new without hesitation. Think about all the things in your life. Over the last just 2 or 3 years, phones and TVs, and we've got cars and appliances and furniture. Think of all the things that you have gained over the last few years and the things that you have let go. When we move on from these said items that we give away, oftentimes it's because they have lost a certain value to us. And we're moving on to things that are bigger and better and brighter and flashier and sometimes even smaller. Now, I wonder if you have ever felt like life treated you like the way that we treat our things. I wonder if you've ever felt like life just used you and left you on the curb, hoping that somebody would pick you up, that somebody would rescue you. Our neighbors put a love seat out in the front of their yard a couple weeks ago, kind of like what we did with our couch. And I remember as I was going by to the mailbox and I saw it, I just had a nice laugh, and I thought to myself, nobody is going to want that couch. The couch that we put on the lawn, at least I upholstered a little bit before, right? I mean, I was cleaned and took the cat hair off, but the people, I mean, it's sitting out there, and I'm like, absolutely not. And it was sitting out there until trash day for a good week. Now, I wonder, have you ever been through seasons of life that left you feeling useless, maybe worthless? You were just a spectacle for people to look at your life and say, they've seen better days. The story that we read from the book of Ruth is one that shows us the heart of God towards those who have felt worthless or without a purpose in their life. The setting of this story in the book of Ruth, in this short book of just 4 chapters, is during the turbulent times of the Judges. Brother Steve preached last week over the time of the Judges and kind of shared a bit of how turbulent of a time that was for Israel's history. You had people that God had raised up to be leaders and to lead the people of God in righteous living. And for maybe a short period of time, the Israelites would get their act together. But it was this back and forth from obedience to rebellion. And as the rebellion cycle would kick back in, it got darker and worse and worse and worse. And so in this particular era of Israel history, of descending to the depths of sin and disobedience and forsaking God, here comes this story that basically zeroes in on a family living in the time of the Judges. In this period of time of Israel where things seem worthless and like Israel is a lost cause, we see as we kind of focus in on this family that God is not done with everybody. That God is still working through the circumstances of Israel's up and down existence to bring about something even better. So just kind of a quick recap for the story of Ruth. You have a husband and wife, Naomi and Elimelech, and their sons, Mahlon and Chilion. And they're living in Bethlehem. And a famine comes upon the land, and Naomi and Elimelech take their 2 sons, and they move just across the river to Moab, which was foreign territory. The Moabites were oppressors of the Israelite people, so this was out of bounds for God's people. But a famine had occurred, and there was probably food in Moab at the time, and so Naomi and Elimelech moved there with their 2 sons. They left Bethlehem as a full family. They left there and they enter into Moab and they receive food. Life seems to be going okay until Elimelech dies, leaving Naomi as a widow. She's still got her 2 sons, and her 2 sons get married to 2 women. If you read fast, it looks like one of them married a lady named Oprah, but it's actually Orpah. And then you've got Ruth, who is also one of the other daughter-in-laws. And so Naomi and her 2 sons and her 2 daughter-in-laws are living together for 10 years in Moab until all of a sudden tragedy strikes again. And Mahlon and Chilion are killed. Not sure what the circumstances are, but now you have not 1 widow, but you have 2 widows. And you have one of the widows is outside of her homeland. What am I going to do? How is she going to survive without the inheritance that she was supposed to have from her husband? Now, the text, as you read through the book of Ruth, it just bluntly states what Naomi's condition is. It says, Naomi was left without her 2 sons and without her husband. Life was pretty rough for her at that time, living as a widow without anyone to take care of her in a foreign land. And at this point, the daughter-in-laws, Orpah and Ruth, it would just make sense for them. I mean, they were from Moab, just to stay in Moab, go back to your families, and kind of recoup whatever you can recoup. And Naomi says as much to her daughter-in-law. She says, go back to your families. I'm going to go back to Bethlehem. Let me be, you salvage what you can from your life. I'm going to salvage what I can from my life. And Orpah decides, okay, I'm going to go back home. But then here comes Ruth. And Ruth absolutely, she does not take Naomi's word for it. In fact, here in Ruth chapter 2, verse 16 through 17, listen to the words of dedication, the words of loyalty from this foreigner woman, Ruth, to her mother-in-law, Naomi. She says, "Don't urge me to leave you or turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates me from you." At this point in the story, life is just absolutely the pits for both of these ladies. And especially for Naomi, losing 2 sons and a husband. Talk about feeling worthless, feeling absolutely without a sense of purpose. Listen to Naomi's words as she describes her situation. As Naomi goes back to Bethlehem, her friends and her family see her and they say, "Hold a second, isn't that Naomi? Is she back in town?" And Naomi says this to her friends and her family. "Don't call me Naomi," she said. "Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Lord Almighty has brought misfortune on me." The name Naomi means beautiful. The name Mara means bitter. And so here's these raw, authentic, unedited words from this woman who lost almost everything. And back in the day when Naomi and Ruth are living in this time period, Israelite widows did not automatically inherit the estate from their husbands when they died, leaving them vulnerable to having to sell the estate to make some money and then live out the rest of their life in servitude to some other family. So when Elimelech had died, his property or his estate in Israel would have had to been sold by Naomi to somebody, hoping that somebody would buy it and then hope that you have enough to live off for a number of years before you have to go into service to somebody else. Now, one of the things that is amazing about the Old Testament law is that there were amazing provisions put in place, encouraging the people to have compassion on orphans and widows, the most vulnerable people in their society. The nearest blood relation in Leviticus says that the nearest blood relation to a widow had the duty to buy back the land from the deceased husband, and then marry the widow, and then take that land not for himself, but then to deed that land to the son that he would have with the widow in the name of the deceased relative. And so this person that we're talking about in the Old Testament was called the kinsman redeemer. He had the responsibility to come in and to take a piece of land and give it back to this widow, in essence, without gaining anything back in return. Now that's what was in the law, but that didn't always happen. You can rest assured that there were many widows who lost husbands and never had anyone step up in their place to buy back their land. In Isaiah 1:17, this is just one area in all of the Old Testament law where the prophets tell the people to take up the cause of the fatherless, to plead the case of the widow, for this is the right thing to do. You see, it's very easy for those in power and those who have a lot to forget about the oppressed and the poor and those who don't have much. In many economies worldwide, the rich and the powerful are rich and powerful because of their wicked greed and their neglect and poor treatment of those who don't have as much. And so in this story, we have a beautiful picture of the gospel. You have this relative called a kinsman redeemer. Think about that word redeemer for a minute. Have you ever been redeemed from something? I remember back in junior high playing on the football team, and I was out there and there was a girl that I wanted to impress, and I was playing wide receiver for a little bit, and I thought I'm going to go out for a pass and make the most spectacular catch to catch the eye of this girl that was on the sidelines, hoping that she was watching me. And of course she was watching me. And I go out and I run down and do my route. The quarterback throws me the ball. And I think, in my mind, it's this graceful Jerry Rice leap into the air to catch the ball. And I go to grab the ball, and it goes right through my hands, smacks me in the face, hits me, gives me a bloody nose, and I go crawling off that field, absolutely in shame. Talk about needing some redemption. Talk about the next practice wanting to go back out on that field and to make a spectacular catch. I don't think I ever made that catch that I thought I was going to have. But have you ever been in need of being redeemed from something? The word redeem means to buy something back. That couch that I gave away, that's worthless and valueless to me. To look at a situation and say, well, I really don't need it, but for the value of that, I will buy it back. To buy something back, to free something from captivity by payment of ransom, to release someone from blame or debt. Does anyone have any blame that you're holding on to in your life? Some debt of unforgiveness, maybe some things in your past that are holding you down that you need to be freed from. Naomi and Ruth present a hopeless situation. They are two widows with absolutely nothing. They are powerless to do anything about their situation, and they need this kinsman redeemer to come in and take notice of their condition and to redeem them from their plight. And so this narrative in Ruth continues as Ruth goes into the field to take some food from the edges of the fields. They were poor, and so she goes and she begins to take some food. And lo and behold, she finds herself in this field that's owned by a man named Boaz. And Boaz is the one who, to Naomi's family, was the closest blood relative that had the chance to redeem back Naomi's land and to give Naomi and Ruth a future. And if you continue to read in the story of Ruth, and I encourage you to do so. If you didn't this week, I encourage you to open up the book this week and read through it and see how the story ends as this man named Boaz, who owns this field, shows absolute loyalty and generosity, not only to Ruth, but to Naomi. And he marries Ruth, and they have a son, and it's just a beautiful story of how some situation as bitter and hopeless can be turned into something beautiful. How something can go from bitter to beautiful. God has that power to do that in your life. This past week, as I was thinking of the best way to kind of illustrate this and to close out, just a couple years ago in Indianapolis, there was a pastor named Richie. I forget his last name now, but his name was Richie. His wife was Amanda. Amanda, about two and a half years ago, she was home alone with their 15-month-old baby. Richie was out running in their neighborhood in Indianapolis, and while Richie was away, Amanda had someone break into their house. 2 men had broken in. They were armed and they were dangerous, and they killed Amanda on the spot. Richie returned back home and found his wife lying in a pool of blood. How to make sense of that, I don't know. I kind of heard about his story in the newspaper, and I read about him, and I looked up his church's website, and lo and behold, about a week later, they were having a funeral. And I saw that they were going to have a live webcast to honor Amanda's life. And I remember watching the man who was up there talking about Amanda's life. And he asked Richie, what can I say about her life that will kind of show us the heart of God? And Richie told the pastor that when they had moved to Indianapolis, they had very little. And so as a young couple, planting a church, not having much, he said that Amanda would go through the classifieds, and basically weekend after weekend she would go to yard sales. And Richie said that Amanda would just pick up nothing but junk. tables and cribs and high chairs that I didn't want to put my child in, he said. And she would bring all this stuff home, and it was sitting in the garage. And she said, no, by the way, you're going to have to sand this stuff down, and you're going to have to paint it for me. But she started bringing all this stuff home, and he said it was just junk to me. It was useless. People had thrown it on the side of the curb. And here she is, and he said she's never been like this. She's bringing all this stuff back home. And on the stage of her funeral, they had a table, and they had chairs, and they had a high chair, and they had all these pieces of furniture that other people had thrown away or had given away for very little money that she had taken and rehabbed. And one of the things that Richie had asked him, he said, why are you doing this? And Amanda said to Richie, she said, it may look like junk right now. She said, but trust me. Give it some time, and let's see how this junk can be turned into our treasure. Think about this story that we've read this week, and how Naomi and Ruth been given such a bitter pill to swallow. The story tells us of a God who says to each and every one of us who may find ourselves in similar circumstances, going from beautiful to bitter, he says, trust me. Give me some time and see what kind of masterpiece I make with the junk of your life. My question to you today is, what things do you have to offer to God? That's only something that you can answer for yourself. And so as we come to this time of an invitation song in a moment, if there's anyone today that has some stuff in your life, you've seen your life go from beautiful to bitter, and maybe you're kind of in that in-between place right now with some bitterness, I invite you to trust God today, to call out to him, to see him as your Boaz, your kinsman redeemer who can come in and turn your situation around. Trust him today as your redeemer. It's in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.